Awareness Lab. My name is Laura Nandakumar. I'm joining today from St. Louis. I'm going to be helping today to moderate the event. And before I pass it over to our great trainers, Michael and Tim Harshbarger, I'm just going to take care of a few housekeeping things. So if you joined a little early, you probably heard me mention that we have captioning and live ASL here for you today if you require it. Feel free to access the captions within Zoom. You can also access the captions via a stream text link, which I will post in chat shortly if you prefer to view it that way. Today's event is going to be a lot of fun and learning, as you probably can already tell. We're going to try to save the last 15 minutes or so for audience questions. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put those in the Zoom Q&A input field. That way we can kind of separate out the questions from the active chat, which we can see is very active. So we're excited to have everybody here today. Before I pass it over to Michael and Tim, I briefly want to highlight one exciting challenge that we're doing today in celebration of Global Accessibility Awareness Day. DQ is doing a Clean Up the Web challenge. And we're encouraging folks to, it's essentially a bug hunt. So we're encouraging folks to go out there, really scan the sites that they love, the brands that they love, and in a positive way, take a look at the bugs that are on that page. And then we have a template for you to send those bugs to the companies, to the brands that you love, and say, hey, are you thinking about these accessibility issues on this global accessibility holiday? If you aren't, here they are. I'm happy to work with you about these bugs. And so we're really encouraging people to participate in this grassroots style awareness challenge to get people who care about accessibility talking with the brands and the companies that they love about accessibility. So it's about spreading awareness. It's not about naming and shaming people for being inaccessible. It's for making sure that we're just talking about it. And it's a grassroots effort to get people talking one-to-one with the brands that they love to think more about accessibility. So I'll pop a link in chat to kind of, if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to participate, we're gonna be giving away t-shirts to people who do. So I will post that in chat shortly, but I just quickly wanted to highlight that awareness challenge. It's a new thing that we're doing this year. I hope you participate. Lastly, today is going to be interactive. It's going to be fun. I know I encourage folks to put their questions into chat. If you are posting questions into the Q&A field, you might be a lucky winner of a fun accessibility t-shirt. Similar to the one I'm wearing, the Digital Equality is my jam t-shirt. So a few folks will be lucky winners of t-shirts if they participate in the question portion of today's event. So with that, that's enough housekeeping things. We have a limited amount of time. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Michael and Tim to kick things off.
And just to let Laura know, even though I knew that there was a t-shirt thing, I'm going to ask about 10 or 15 questions at the end, just so I get into that drawing. I love that t-shirt. That's why we'll see. I doubt it. Anyway, I'll give us some time to just introduce ourselves. Let me start with the other Harshbarger first. And Tim, would you love to introduce yourself to the team we have today, Tim, and tell a little bit about yourself before we start?
I am Tim Harshbarger. Some call me Tim. I have been doing accessibility for a very long time. I've worked at DQ since 2018, but I actually have been doing accessibility since the mid 90s. And I've worked on all sorts of things like desktop and mobile and web and things like that. More pertinent for today's discussion, beyond just my accessibility consulting work, I am also totally blind. So I grew up with a visual impairment. I was been considered legally blind for most of my life. Had sight in only one eye, and then in 2013 I was involved in an accident and lost some of sight. So many people that you meet who are blind will possibly have some light light perception. I actually have no perception at all. In fact, if we met, both my eyes are artificial. They're prosthetics. They're not real. They look real, but they're not real. So I use a screen reader all the time. So Mike, you can go ahead.
All right, so my name is Michael Harshbarger. I actually have worked at DQ for 3 years, 8 months. Just updated that today. I was looking and seeing how long I had worked at DQ. I am the younger brother team of Tim and Michael. We both train here at DQ. I am a senior trainer here at DQ. Tim will tell you that he's the smarter, better looking one, but I just want to point out which one of us has his camera on. So I win that one, I think, this time around. If you want to know why I was started at DQ 3 years and 8 months ago, I had worked for a Fortune 50 company for 22 years before coming to DQ. And the reason I decided to make accessibility my full big time gig is you're meeting one of the biggest reasons in my older brother, and the fact that I've had a brother with a visual impairment all my life. And I think Tim and I would agree on two things. One, accessibility is about people. So we might talk about ones and zeros and websites and digital assets, but when it comes down to it, it is truly about people. And two, it's about independence. Tim has a lot of personal stories when it comes to independence, but I love the fact that as accessibility has become more in the view of the general public, Tim is able to do things on his time by himself versus having to call little brother and saying, hey, I need help with this. That to me is something that has been, I know Tim opened up complete new worlds for you, even as simple as now grocery shopping. For Tim, grocery shopping used to be called me, say, hey, Michael, I need to go grocery shopping. He would then have to fit it to my schedule. I'd take him to the grocery store. And of course, even though he had a list, it wasn't like I would go through the grocery shelves and explain every single item on that grocery shelf to him, right? So even if he said, hey, I'm looking for a thing of mustard, I wouldn't sit there and give him detailed explanations of all the mustards on the shelf. But with digital accessibility now, we live in a town about 120,000 people, just 2.5 hours south of Chicago. Before COVID, there was one grocery store he could order from. Now, pretty much every grocery store in town has a website that's accessible to Tim. And the great thing about it is it really has allowed him to do it on his time, purchasing what he wants. And that's why we think accessibility and digital accessibility is so important to everybody in the world. Now, we talk about digital awareness, accessibility awareness today. There's many ways people experience the web as there are people in the world. And the purpose today is just to give you a experience, Tim's experience on what it is like when he uses the web. And so part of today, what we're going to do is have Tim actually use the web on a site that we have within DQ, a demo site, and you can experience that as well. But before we start there, what I want to do is I want to share a quick video with you. This video is just going to cover digital accessibility at like a 20,000 foot look. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to get us all on the same page when Tim or I say digital accessibility, what we mean. So let me go ahead and share this video with you really quick. And it should give us a little baseline on what we mean when we say digital accessibility.
Imagine if 90% of the websites or mobile apps you use today locked you out. Everyone else continues to experience the convenience of mobile banking, the connectedness of social media, and the freedom of online shopping. But for you, they're inaccessible. For the 57 million people with disabilities in the United States, this is their everyday experience. People with visual, auditory, motor, speech, and cognitive disabilities rely on various assistive technologies and alternate methods of interaction to use digital documents, web, and mobile apps. People with visual disabilities may rely on screen readers, braille displays, zoom functions, or high-contrast colors to get value from what's displayed on screen. People with auditory disabilities often rely on captions or transcripts for video content. People with motor disabilities might require speech-to-text software or keyboard-only interactions. People with speech disabilities require a non-vocal means of interaction. And finally, people with cognitive disabilities often require thoughtful and organized layouts with clear direction. Digital accessibility is the practice of making digital documents, web, and mobile apps accessible to everyone, including people with disabilities. Accessible sites and apps are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Building accessible sites or apps can be tricky without the right guidance. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, published by the W3C, is the standard rule set that defines what makes a site accessible. Developers, testers, app owners, and accessibility experts from around the world rely on these standards for proper accessibility testing direction. In fact, many U.S. federal government agency sites and apps are required by law under Section 508 to be accessible. This law includes the WCAG standard. In the U.S. and European Union, WCAG is being adopted across private sector businesses as well. Whether you're following legal requirements or proactively working to make the web a better place, practicing digital accessibility makes a real difference for millions of people. To start making your site more accessible, try the free Axe browser extension or reach out to your local accessibility community for other recommendations on where to start. DQ. Accessibility for good.
The great thing about that video is towards the end, if you noticed, and we'll give a little hint about it today, is that there actually is something you can do. So as Laura mentioned in the beginning about engaging companies, the Axe DevTools is free download. You can use it to scan a site and get automated tests. And that's also mentioned in that video. And we'll mention that again later. This video was made some years back that 57 million people have increased to 61 million people in the United States with the recent CDC data. So that means 26% of the US population is self-identified as having a disability. Actually, we look at the worldwide, because I know we have a worldwide audience, 1.3 billion people identify as having a disability, or 10 to 15% of the world population self-identify as having a disability as well. So as we know, when we talk about GAD, we're dealing with a very large audience. We're dealing with a large population that is underserved in a lot of cases. And being aware of people with disabilities does help them in many ways. In fact, I have an example of a web page here. It is a clothing website, as we can tell by New Arrivals Clothing Plus Dress Shop Collections and Sales. And we can see it's for a split tie sleeve top, and it's even on sale for $71. The color is print, and the sizes are medium, large, or extra large. Now, I always try to convince Tim to buy this split tie sleeve top. I haven't been able to convince him yet. And the question, of course, is, would you buy this product? Well, I don't know anything about it, except it's $71 and it has print, and I might be able to get it in extra large. But if my images on the site did not have alternative text, and so therefore a screen reader could not use it, this is exactly what I would see. Now, when I show y'all the screen, I will tell you, I don't think Tim has the shoulders for it. And so therefore he still doesn't buy the top. Also, the fact that you can see print is flowers, blue flowers as well. And so think about how different this product is to you just by having those pictures. And imagine if you had to use a screen reader instead. Tim, a lot of people are saying poor Tim in the chat. So I guess I will not be buying you the split tie sleeve top for your Christmas present either. So they're
And
saving
believe
you
me,
from
there
that
have been a
too.
few times when I've ordered clothing and got some surprises.
Oh, well, hold on. I've got someone, Renee, who thinks you would rock it, Tim, that Tim could pull it off. Robert says you could pull it off
Oh,
too. So
okay.
you've got some believers here. You've got some believers already from that perspective. Now I'm going to show you an example, and Beth and Lizzie is actually helping us with this example. I'm going to show you a joke. I love this joke. I think it's hilarious. Do not affect your sound because this joke is just the video itself. And I want us all to just enjoy this joke thoroughly. So I'm going to play this video. Fantastic joke. Try not to laugh too loud, but I want you to go ahead and see this joke. Let's go ahead and enjoy this joke together. Love that joke. It's a classic joke. I think it's a fantastic joke. Now, let me ask you a question. Let's say you don't know ASL. Let's say you don't know American Sign Language. And I asked you, what was this joke about? Imagine how that made you feel, right? If I was in a crowd of a bunch of people who knew ASL and that joke was told and I didn't know ASL, how I would feel left out, how I would feel so excluded. I'd be like, what is he talking about? Why is everybody laughing? Did he talk about me? What's he talking about? Now, for you don't know ASL, it's a grenade joke. This gentleman was teaching a couple other gentlemen how to throw a grenade, and you counted to 10 after you pulled the pin and you threw the grenade. And the first gentleman did it. And if you watched, he said, perfect, great job. The second gentleman started counting to 10 and got to 5 of his fingers and went, oh, I need to put it down so I can count to 10, and boom, all of a sudden. So as you can see, imagine if the shoe was on the other foot, right? Imagine if you could not understand the content because something wasn't provided for you. Now we're going to watch Tim use his screen reader. I want us to experience this and Tim narrate that for us. And the purpose of him using his screen reader is so we can better understand how someone might use data provided on the web. Now, I want you to feel comfortable. Laura mentioned this to us. We're going to get a chance for questions. I want you to feel comfortable asking the questions about Tim's experience. Tim will narrate it for us, but I want you to feel comfortable with Tim and his experience in asking questions. In fact, Tim, I think I'm going to steal this from you because you've said it when we've done this before. Any question you will ask won't offend Tim. The only person who can offend Tim is me, and that's because I've had all these years of practice to offend him.
Yes.
So if you have a question about his experience, yeah, I have. I'm going to put a master class on it. If you have a question, I don't want you to hesitate. I don't want you to hesitate asking a question because Tim has been a great resource for me to ask questions to and to really learn more about his experience. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, Tim, and let you start sharing yours.
Let me know when you've stopped.
Yep. One thing I am going to say is when he turns on the screen reader, it's going to read really fast. Don't worry about that. He'll have a text box up on his screen that we can read, but we don't want Tim to slow down his screen reader because we really truly want to experience what Tim experiences. So I've got ahead and turned off my screen share. Tim, if you want to start sharing yours.
Okay, just a second here.
Meeting controls window.
Okay, it should be sharing soon.
It
here.
is. I can see it and hear it. Perfect.
Train and
So
bus made
great
easy.
job.
Travel by train and bus made easy. System menu. Travel by train and bus made easy. Out of list link home.
We're going to use this site. So some things I'm going to mention here to begin with is there'll be a captioning window towards the bottom of the screen, and whatever the screen reader says is going to appear in that screen. So Let me do something here. I'm going to press the down arrow.
Navigation landmark list with 4 items. Link login/register.
So you heard it read a bunch of information there. The speed it's reading at is the speed that I actually listen to things normally. This is the speed I do now. I will tell you, when I first started using a screen reader, I did not listen to things at this speed. I listened to them very, very slowly. It took a while for me to get adjusted and move up to much faster speeds. Other thing that I want you to notice is there will be a highlight moving across on the screen, and that's basically going to give you an idea of what part of the screen reader is reading. So I'm going to hit the down arrow key again.
English.
Now notice it read the word English. Not really sure what that has to do with anything, other than maybe the site is in English.
USD.
And it read USD. Okay, some letters.
Blank. Link discover.
So there you heard it say link discover. So notice here. So the one thing, you notice that here, you look at it, you can see a link. For me, as a screen reader user, someone who can't see the screen, I know it's a link because it tells me it's a link, and then it tells me the name of that link, so discover. So when I move around the screen, there's a lot of things where it's going to report the role of what the item is, and then tell me the name of it. Occasionally, it might report some other information, but I'll highlight that as we go through this. So that's kind of some of the things that the screen reader provides for me. So let's go ahead, and I think we want to book some tickets. We're going to, let's see. So what I would do first on this. So one thing I want you to know is you guys are seeing all the screen. The one thing to keep in mind that is I, as a screen reader, I'm not seeing any of this. The only information I really know about a web page is whatever the screen reader has relayed to me, or whatever I remember from what it has said to me already when I'm reading this page, or what I remember from the last time I visit this page. This is not a page I visit but very infrequently, so I really don't know this page very well. And so I'm having to go by what it says. So one thing I'm going to do is this. So I'm going to book a trip here, and I'm going to first go over and jump by headings and see if I can find the section that lets me do that. So I'm going to hit the H key.
Banner landmark by travel packages for your favorite destinations today. Heading level 1.
Can you hear it, Mike? Is the volume okay?
Yep, I can hear it.
Okay, so
A
there
lot of people are surprised on how fast you read it, but like you said, this is based on experience. Tim's got a lot of experience with it.
I'm used to how it pronounces things. So there it told me it was a heading level 1. I'm not really sure if that's what I'm looking for.
Set out on your new adventure. Heading level 1.
Set out on my new adventure, another heading level 1.
Spectacular mountain vistas. Heading level 3 link.
Spectacular mountain vistas.
Deserts that will leave you thirsting for more. Heading level 3 link.
Deserts that will leave you thirsting for more. I see the pun. That's not really what I'm looking for.
Out in nature with all the comforts of home. Heading level 3 link.
No, another we're heading.
Lose yourself beneath the lush jungle canopy. Heading level 3 link.
There's lose yourself between the lush and the lush canopy.
Out in nature with all the comforts of home. Heading level 3 link.
Okay, this is.
Lose yourself beneath the lush jungle
I'm
canopy.
not really sure what's going on.
nature,
Going backwards here.
Deserts that will leave you thirsting for more. Heading level 3 link.
Okay.
Out in nature with lose yourself beneath popular journeys. Heading level 3.
Popular journeys.
No next heading.
Okay, nothing there really is what sounds promising. So I'm going to go back to the top of the page.
Banner landmark link home.
And there it says link home. That's the first link on the page.
Navigation landmark list with 4 items. Link login/register.
So there is a navigation section, and there's a login and a register link, but I'm not going to do that.
English.
English. Okay, that must be the language the page is in.
USD.
Those are just pieces of plain text. So English and USD. Not really sure okay, we'll figure it out hopefully.
Blank. Link discover.
Link discover.
Link help.
Link help.
Out of list banner landmark. Heading level 1 by travel packages.
Buy travel packages
Heading level 1 for your favorite destinations today.
for my favorite destinations today.
List with 3 items. Unbelievably convenient.
Oh, they're really convenient.
Choose your currency.
It says choose my currency. Okay.
We always treat you right.
But the next thing that says we always treat you right. So I'm not sure.
Out of list link graphic. Get it on Google Play.
Okay, and it's telling me I can get it on Google Play here.
Link graphic download on the App Store.
I can download it on the App Store.
Graphic Trustpilot logo.
Okay, there's Trustpilot.
Link 89% based on 52,371 reviews.
Okay.
Buy train and bus tickets.
Okay, that might be it. Buy bus and train tickets.
From station edit required invalid entry from.
Okay.
By train and bus from station edit required invalid entry from.
So let's do this. I'm
I
gonna
trained a bus
go
ticket.
here.
From station edit required invalid entry from. From station edit required invalid entry from blank.
Okay, so
So
I'm
Tim,
gonna,
we just heard a beep and I
Yeah.
noticed your cursor changed color from red to blue. Can you tell us what happened there?
so what I did is I went into performance mode, so I can now interact with the page and enter data. Before, anytime I hit a key, it would do something like take me to another page element. So I'm gonna start here. It doesn't really tell me what I need to do, but I'm gonna type in where I am at.
Bloomington.
So a lot of people were asking how he was navigating to that page. So if you remember at first, he used the H key to go by headers. And
And I
then the
was using
second
the-
time he used the arrow key just to go down the elements on the page to see if
Yeah.
he could figure out where to go.
So that's there. So I'm gonna hit tab because that's the from. I want to go from Bloomington, Illinois
IL. The station edit required invalid entry to blank.
to station. Let's go to St. Louis.
ST.
Okay.
Lewis.
All right. I think I got that right.
Mo. One-way label.
One-way label. Okay. I'm gonna have to go into browse mode again here.
The station edit required ST. Lewis. Mo. One way.
So it says one way here. Maybe that's tickets.
Return.
And return. Is that maybe that's return date? I don't know. Let's see. Let's go down further, see what else we can run into here.
Departing.
Departing.
Tuesday 30th June 23:00.
So it tells me I'm gonna
Departing. Tuesday 30th June
June
23:00.
30th. I really want to go much sooner than that.
Passengers.
And it says passengers.
Adult 2659 years.
Okay. Adults.
Button remove passenger.
Gonna remove a passenger.
1.
One. That may be the number of passengers.
Button add passenger.
Add a passenger.
Button show all passenger types.
Show all
So-
passenger types.
So I'll tell the participants that if you'll notice when Tim started using a screen reader, I turned off my video. And the reason I did that is I don't know about you, but as Tim is navigating through a page, I have a tendency to use body language, meaning if I want him to click something, you would actually see me start moving my body around when I want to move him left or right. Tim, I think it's important for you to know of you're really having to guess on some of these things because
Yeah.
they're not very well labeled. You know, so here's one thing that Tim, I think it's to remember about this experience, and I think you've said it in other places that we've talked. You really don't go out and just surf a web page, right? You've got a
No.
task you want to complete, and this task right now is a little frustrating for you because you're having to guess on some of these
Yeah,
things that
well,
you're doing, right?
like it's setting a date for June 30th, but I haven't seen anything that lets me change the date. There was a bunch of things about one way, returning, departure, and I have a feeling that right now, if I order a ticket, it's gonna be one way, and I'd like to be able to actually get back home. I think it's just one passenger. Adult passenger. It looks like there may be other types. So
Button add passenger. Button show all passenger
but I
types.
really have, again, I have no way idea. I'm assuming if I do the add a passenger, I add another adult passenger. But again, I don't want to go on the June 30th. I want to do something sooner than that. So I think I got the from and to correctly entered. So really, there's a lot of things I'm guessing on here. The only ones I feel comfortable about are from and to, and maybe passenger, and the other stuff I'm not sure what I need to do to be able to select what I want, because I want
Yeah, so-
round trip and I want
Yep.
much sooner date.
So let's say you had hit this page. This is a demo page we use at DQ to show accessibility or sometimes the frustration of lack of accessibility. Let's say this dream destination was a really real business. At this point in time, what would you do? Would you continue to try to book those bus tickets, or would you probably look for alternatives at this point? in
I would
time?
probably be looking for alternatives at this point because, again, the ticket's probably not going to be cheap no matter what I do. So I'm not, I don't want to sink money into finding that I've got one-way tickets on a date I don't want to choose. And if it's like you and I going that I didn't get enough tickets, or I got too many tickets, or I got one adult ticket and one child, and so one of us is going to have to pretend like we're 10, which is not going to work out very well for
I
either one
don't
of
think
us.
so. No, no,
Yeah, I don't think, yeah.
yeah.
So, it's going to be a disaster. And so I'm not willing to take a risk here. So I'd probably try to see if I could find an alternative that worked better.
So Tim,
That time around.
let's talk about another story that I think really underscores the fact that you might go look something else for another piece. So
Yeah.
if you don't mind sharing, or that you don't have to necessarily share us the names of the companies, but could you talk to the participants today about your banking experience and some of the choices you had to make as you were choosing a bank to bank with?
So before online banking, I really had to have someone sit down with me and go through bills and information and the information I got, because everything was paper, right? And paper stuff doesn't work well for me. Paper might as well all be blank. I will have no clue what's going on with the paper unless I scan it. And honestly, I will tell you, as good as scanning can be, I'm always a little reluctant to depend on scanning of numbers, because that if there's any mistakes in there, that can be a pretty costly mistake. And so eventually when banking started moving more online, I became interested in doing stuff online so that I could pay bills and things like that. I actually got to do participate in a study one time with a bank where the accessibility issues for that bank, um, they asked me afterwards, and it's like, well, I was able to pay the bill, but I'm not sure. My concern with it is I'm not sure who I paid what. Either I sent my mortgage to the company owns my mortgage, or I sent my mortgage to my utility company, and my utility payment to my mortgage company. And I have a feeling that while my utility company might be okay with receiving my mortgage money, I don't think my mortgage company is going to be very happy with the utility money. So eventually I found a bank that was basically starting to work on the accessibility of their site. They'd already done some stuff for checking, and they were still working on other stuff. They weren't perfect by any means, but they were good enough. They were doing accessibility and planning on putting more emphasis. And so I chose that bank. The thing I think Mike's wanting me to point out is that bank actually does not have branches in our town. There is no local branch for this bank. I picked the bank because it was accessible, even though the nearest bank branch of this bank is many miles away from it, even still now, because I needed to do online banking, and I wanted accessible banking, and that was the choice I had. And again, accessibility for me is not a nice to have. I really need to have it to be able to use the features of it. So ultimately, I chose this bank that where I had no local branch I could go to, and where everything I had to do was online. Of course,
Well,
the
and
nice thing is, as time has gone on, more and more things have moved that way, which has made it even easier. But
yeah, well, and it's one of those things of when you're making buying decisions, and
yeah,
I've seen you run into this multiple times. Whereas for me, accessibility is a nice to have. For you, it's a requirement, right? And so
yeah,
sometimes your choices are limited because they're not accessible. And that also it can be frustrating as well, because where I might go to a site and price might be my first important thing that I look for. If it's not even accessible on the ground floor for you, you can't consider it,
it
right?
makes it much
Because
more hard. It makes it harder to justify spending the money for something that I'm not going to be able to get the full functionality of, or get the wrong thing and have to get it work through refunds and stuff like that. So
right.
it's not a nice to have. It's something that I really have to look into and get some level of accessibility before I can really choose to follow that path.
Well, and we've had situations where Tim has had to make decisions without accessibility in it. And again, I told the story earlier about grocery shopping. When you deal with financial information, the only way if it's not accessible is for him to share his financial information. Now, I will tell you, and I've often said this to people, I love my older brother. In fact, my older brother was my best man at my wedding. That's how good of a friends Tim and I am. But I don't feel comfortable sharing my financial information with Tim. But sometimes Tim didn't have a choice, right? Tim didn't have a choice. And so it's that independence and choice. I think as we walk through even examples like buying travel packages is so important and so important to Tim.
Yeah. And just like Mike had that example again, I have ordered things online, and the thing that shows up at the house is not anything what I imagined just from the what I could access on the so to the point where depending on what I'm ordering, I may ask, "Hey Mike, can you look at this before?"
Yep.
I order this?"
Yeah.
'Cause I want to make
Well,
sure
and
what I
there's
think
times
I'm
I've
going to get is what's going to show up in the house.
there's sometimes I've gotten early birthday presents too, because I
Yes,
remember
that's
one
right.
time you ordered a shaver, and when it came, you said, "Hey, I ordered a shaver," and I said, "No, Tim, you actually ordered 3 shavers." And he's like, "Well, do you want one? They're a pretty good shaver." So that's
Yes.
sometimes some things that happen to him in times where little brother's over at his house, and I'm like, "Did you mean to order 6 of these?" No. Did I
Yes.
get 6 of these? So
Yeah.
very frustrating case on
Yeah.
that. How about we've gone through this page a little bit. Is there other things you would like to highlight for us with the screen reader itself on this page?
Well, the one thing to notice here.
Button add passenger.
Let's see.
Button show. Button more. Button add real card. Button search. Button add real card. Button search. Button add real card. Button more options.
See here, it says that some things here buttons. So I know if I click on these, something should happen.
Button show all passenger types. Button add passenger. 1. Button remove passenger. Adult. 26 passengers. Tuesday 30th June.
But
23,
here, right,
00. Departing.
I have departing.
Tuesday
I
30th June.
assume
23,
that
00.
that's the day I'm departing is June 30th. But I assume there's got to be some way to select a date. Of course, all I'm hearing here is a date. And notice it says, so whenever it tells me it doesn't say a role, I assume that's just static text. I can't interact with it.
Passengers.
And I don't really
Tuesday
have a
30th
way
June.
to
23,
interact with it.
departing. Return.
And then like return, is there a return date or what's that?
One way.
One way, okay. Is that selected? Does that mean I'm going to be purchasing? So there's a bunch of things here that are just static text. Again, I have a suspicion.
The station edit link swap stick from station edit reply train and bus ticket banner landmark link graphic trust billet logo link graphic download on link graphic edit list with 3 items. Choose your currency.
It says choose your currency here. I assume I'm getting the idea that maybe this
Out of list banner land navigation land English USD.
This USD up here may be related to that somehow, but they're really far apart as far as the screen reader. So again, there's a lot of stuff here that's just reading just text. I don't have a role. I have no information if it's interactive. And so I really am having difficulty figuring out exactly how to do some stuff on this page and how to select some things. And so that's, again, that's a lot of times, again, I can't see the interface. So I can't, you look at the interface and there's all sorts of information you're absorbing because of the way things are, font sizes and colors and borders and shapes and images. And there's also got white space. There's all these things that are part of the visual UI language that conveys information about what things you can interact with and what things provide information and stuff like that. But for me, I've got to hear those words. And if I don't hear that it's a button, I'm not going to know it's a button. If I don't hear it's a radio button, I won't know it's a radio button. If I don't hear that it's the checkbox is checked, I won't know if it's checked or not. So all this information, again, needs to be provided in this to me in some way. The other thing is just realize it's all linear. So it may take me a little bit longer to do some things because I have to process it linear. Honestly, that's not a big deal. I just want it to be an efficient thing. So sometimes when Mike and I do this, we'll do a thing where I order a cup of coffee, and frequently I'm still ordering the cup of coffee about 10 minutes in. And the fact is, I don't want to spend any more time doing these type of things. So like ordering these tickets, You know, when you go out to order tickets for travel, you know, let's say Mike and I were gonna do a trip down to St. Louis for a long weekend. I don't want to spend an hour trying to order a pair of tickets. I want to get it done and move on to whatever's next, right? Whatever, maybe whatever planning we need to do next for that. So that's something to keep in mind. Why the accessibility, the details about how I access stuff is different. The tasks I want to do, the things I want to accomplish, the fact that I don't want to spend 3 hours on a particular task. That's all pretty similar between me and other people, or people with disabilities and people without disabilities.
All right, Tim. So what we're gonna do is, I'll take back, well, actually, if you stop screen sharing, I'll take screen
Sure.
sharing back. But, really what we want to
Meeting
do
folder
is
one,
spend
meeting folder
the next time here, Laura, if you don't mind helping us out, I know there was a lot of questions that we were getting. Why don't we go ahead and pick some of the questions out and see, what we can do to help the, participants?
Yes, great job. So I've picked out some of the top questions. And one question that really stood out to me, I think, which is a very good question for people who are new to accessibility, is who's responsible for, making a web page accessible? Who is kind of creating the structure of the page so that Tim can navigate it and get the information he needs with his screen reader?
Tim, I'll let you start off on that one about roles and what kind of roles are responsible for making that accessible, and then I can.
Well, the
feed
one
in.
thing that we often talk about, because we do this in training, is talk about how actually everybody involved in the creation of a web page or UI has a part to play in accessibility. So there's some things a developer should do. There's some things a designer can do. There's some things a BA can do. So, a BA might write the requirements. A designer for some of these things might say, well, this image we added to the page needs to have this alt text. This is a button. This thing over here is supposed to be a link. We have a certain heading structure, right? And then the developer may encode some of this information when they're writing the code. So really the thing with accessibility is it doesn't all fall on one person's shoulders. It actually is a combination of effort by a bunch of people, each doing their part of the puzzle. And it's not just limited to the people I've discussed. It can involves people in QA, it can involve your project managers, your product owners, things like that, that everybody can have a part to play in accessibility. And part of that is each person learning what their role is and how they can contribute to that overall goal.
And I think the really thing that Tim, that you underscore is everybody has a role to play. Certain roles are responsible for certain things, but it's a team thing, and everyone needs to talk through when it comes to your organization of who is the best person to address that particular gap in accessibility. So it really depends on your organization, but all team members we find is all hands on deck because there's different aspects of a page that needs to come up together to make it accessible.
There's many other things. The one thing about accessibility is while the details of accessibility are unique to accessibility, there's a lot of things in general it shares with other issues you deal with when you're creating digital content.
Yeah.
Where everybody has a role to play. Everybody needs to know their piece of the puzzle for everything to work. It's not all one person's responsibility and they're the only one that, every person can have some impact on how accessible a product is.
Agreed.
Great. We have another question here asking, what are the top reasons that companies maybe push back when it comes to making things accessible? What are things that we hear out in the field, and what are some things that you could say back to any any argument that we shouldn't be practicing accessibility.
Yeah, so Laura,
besides the obvious one that it's the right thing to do.
so Laura, we've seen a lot of concerns different ways from different companies. One of them is sometimes we'll hear about, and this is why we started the session this way, is sometimes we'll hear back to, well, there's not really that many people with disabilities in the world, right? So it's a lot of expense for not a lot of return on investment. And I think we just need to help organizations realize that it's 10 to 15% of the world population, or 26% of the US population. That's including just people who I self-identify as having a disability. I like to use myself as a personal example here. As you all see from my video, I have glasses on, and I have a secret for you. If I take them off like this, all my screens just got really blurry all of a sudden, because they're reading glasses. Now, on my mobile device, I of course have pinch to zoom. And if I don't have my reading glasses with me, oh, do I pinch to zoom. So there's an accessibility feature that helps me, even though I am not a person who would identify as having a disability. And that's something else we need to consider when we're doing that. The other piece is, and I know some people have mentioned this in the chat, I just don't know where to start. It is a skill thing. You do have to learn accessibility. It's not something that just happens organically. You'll have to spend some time learning it. And so really the point is there are places to start. There are places to start. That's also why I also show that video at the beginning, because it does mention Axe, and using a free tool to start learning accessibility like Axe DevTools does. I will tell you, before I even came to Deque 3 years, 8 months ago, that's how I learned about accessibility, was to start there and start understanding what I could do to make a difference. And that was a huge beginning journey in my part. So sometimes it's just a skill gap, right? Of, well, yeah, I know I should make things accessible. It's the right thing to do. Now what? Now what? And that's another piece. And I don't know, Laura, if we've got this question. I'm sure we've got it somewhere. But I want to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about, but now there are things like accessibility, things that I can just add to my website and it's accessible like that. I want to talk about just the fact is there is different experiences with this. I know Tim has hit some of those sites with those overlays that have caused his assistive technology to stop working. And so the company means well, and the fact that they're trying to make something accessible, but I would be very careful on quick fixes, because they can have adverse effects on your digital assets. And like I said, I have seen it where the overlay or the tool says, no. To be accessible, you have to use me. You can't use what you're used to, and it causes the customer frustration. It causes the person to slow down and not be able to do what they're able to do. And why I think of that personally, as I mentioned, Tim is a big aspect of my life. So I'm also a father of 4, and my 2 middle kids are Grace and Seth, have ADHD and dyslexia. And I will tell you, we're learning about accessibility through them. Is one of the things that was eye-opening to me is Grace uses a screen reader too. It's not that she's visually impaired. She uses it so it helps her read faster. And when she gets to a website and it says, nope, you can't use your screen reader because of something that's underneath the covers, it becomes very frustrating for her, because just like Tim, she's wanting to get through it fast as she can. And now something that should take her a couple minutes ends up taking her a half hour or so, because she's got to read through that text. So I don't know, Tim, if you have any other comments on experiences that you've had with that as well.
Well, the one thing I want to mention about, so sometimes companies will, when companies push back, there'll be concerns about cost, right? And it is a new thing. There's a new thing. You're doing whenever you learn a new task and do a new thing like security, performance, if it's new to you, yeah, it takes some time to get adjusted, but those costs go down as you do it more frequently. The other thing is sometimes people worry about aesthetics, or they're concerned that they're going to have to make these trade-offs, and it's going to be, to make it accessible, we make it less usable for other people. The one thing I'll mention about that particular discussion is people will say that I've done accessibility for a very long time. I will tell you that it has exceedingly rare that I've ever been in a situation where I've told somebody, you can't do that because it's not accessible. Often what happens is it's not that accessibility makes you say, well, you can't do that, that's not accessible. It's often that's a good idea, but let's do something in addition. So for one thing, we'll talk about color. One of the rules for the specification WCAG color is don't use color alone for information. Now, that guidance is never use color, because honestly, using color in an interface can be extremely useful and helpful for many people. They actually can have some accessibility benefits for some people. The thing is, with color, we just have to realize that not everybody perceives color at all or perceives color the same. And so we'll say, okay, let's use color for this interface, and we can use color to convey information. Let's just make sure it's not the only way this information. So if we have when we have users who have difficulty perceiving that color or don't perceive color at all, they still get that same information. So that's one thing that people often will be afraid of, that accessibility is going to be a trade-off, and it's going to be, we either make it accessible for people with disability or usable for people without disabilities, and that is almost never actually a thing. That's not usually how that works. Usually it's we can do this and that, not we can do this or that. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Well, and Tim, I think you and I have had the conversation of, if I go to a group of developers and say to them, people get information in different ways. Some people use mobile, some people use tablets, some people use laptops, some people use computers. They look at me and say, okay, that's not rocket science. When we're talking about accessibility, what we're asking is for people to consider people get information in different ways. Some people use screen readers. Some people use keyboards. Some people use captions. Some people use text, right? As we saw in that initial video. And so really what accessibility is about is somebody might be getting to my information in a different way. Have I included them in that information as well by thinking about this particular item? And that's really what we're looking for, is just to be able to ask the questions to include everybody in our media that we're producing. Laura, any other questions that we have too?
Yes, I really like this question because I think, we've talked a lot about in that demo, what does an inaccessible website look like? But I think sometimes it's helpful for people when they're learning to look at, examples of an accessible website. So I didn't know, Tim, if you had any websites or products that are good examples of accessibility that people could go to as a resource.
I will be honest, I'm always a little reluctant to suggest any site, because when it comes to accessibility, we're not looking for perfection, and none of the sites that I use are going to be perfect in all ways. We typically talk about WCAG as a standard, a specification, and the design it. And so just because something's accessible to me doesn't mean that it doesn't have accessibility issues to somebody else. So something that works well for me and works for me as a screen reader user that may even fit all those requirements that most impact me may not work in good ways for somebody else. So, again, I'll use things like Instacart and things along those lines. I'll use, are they perfect? No, they've got some issues here and there. Definitely have some accessibility. But that's one thing that people often ask for. Show us an example that will show us exactly what to do. And every site, there's a bunch of good sites out there, and they do some things really well, and they may not do everything perfectly. So I'm always a little concerned about suggesting sites, because if you draw if you point at the wrong thing and say, well, what about I did it this way? And it's like, yeah, well, that part probably wasn't what you wanted to use as an example. So usually it's best to focus on specific examples of specific design patterns or specific interactions along those lines. So.
Well, and I included in the chat a link to an article. If you go out to the DQ site and type in myth, a friend of ours, a colleague of ours, Carrie Fisher, wrote an article. It's back in 2018, but in her article in Myth 4, because it's titled "The 5 Digital Accessibility Myths Busted." In Myth 4, she talks about mostly accessible websites. And so it's not a guarantee that all these websites are 100% accessible, but if you want to look at a website that's worked very hard on being accessible, this is a decent list as well. And I really do appreciate, Carrie says the same thing Tim says. You got to be careful because it might be accessible one day and not accessible the next. But these I've checked on with some frequencies and find on a pretty regular basis, they've got some good accessibility in it.
I mean, I can tell you some things that make for good. So as a screen reader site, I appreciate sites that have across their site, have a good consistent use of landmarks and headings. As you noticed, I jumped around by headings and focused on that. I also use landmarks too to tell me what part of the page. I don't usually jump around by landmarks, but it can be useful to know that, oh, this part of the page is the header. This is the footer. This is the main content. Oh, I'm in a navigational section. So using the headings and landmarks definitely as a screen reader user can help me get, again, because you realize there may be a lot of memorization with the screen reader, and why I don't memorize every last detail of the site, right? Those headings and landmarks often give me a good overview of the parts of the site. So if I'm looking for something specific, like how to order some tickets, I might be able to find that much faster using that without having to read through the whole entire page.
One thing I will offer to everyone, I think, and Gloria, stop me if I'm incorrect, we do have another event tomorrow about a fundamentals boot camp. You can go out on DQ's webpage and click on the Global Accessibility Awareness Day with DQ. I believe you can still sign up for that, register for that boot camp. There's some other resources out there for GAD too. Tim and I would love to personally invite you to that as well, because we'll be working on that session as well. And then also, Laura mentioned at the beginning of the session about, reaching out to those companies, right? Reaching out to those companies and talking about accessibility with maybe a company that's very important to you. Because as consumers, that's one thing we can help with at all times is just, if nothing else, ask the simple question about how are you doing with accessibility? Because sometimes a company just doesn't think about it until the question is asked. But there's a lot of companies out there that I will also admit do have good answers. So we're going to encourage that. So Laura, I think we could echo. We hope to see you tomorrow. Loved the questions, loved the interaction in the chat and questions. Tim and I could probably spend the rest of the day just answering questions, right, Tim, if we got to all the questions. But I want to thank everybody for their curiosity. I want to thank everybody for their time and attention. And just thanks for being part of GAD. That's so important to every single one of us. So thank you. And we hope to see you tomorrow.
Yep. Have a wonderful day. And thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Recording stopped.